Hervé, when Jenny invited me to come and speak to you tonight several months ago, I had no idea that it would be the very day that the New Yorkers, the magazine that I work for, food issue would come out. And I have a piece in the New Yorker this week about the cronut and the pretzel croissant to New York pastries and their fight. And we tend to talk about things that are really quite small scale, like a cronut, for instance, as being radical or revolutionary. But this book is a truly radical and revolutionary book, it seems to me. As you can see, I turned it down generously as I read it, actually on a plane.
Because you have two.
Yes, that's right. On the plane coming back from France.
I don't know exactly what a discussion is, so perhaps I will not behave correctly, but I beg your pardon.
No, that's fine. So let me ask you first, would you explain to us, if you would, it's so many questions rise from this book, so many profound questions.
By the way, the title in French is Note by Note Cooking in 12 Smiling Questions.
Yes.
It's a difference. The publisher said the future of food, which is true, but it's less smiling.
Is there, by the way, I meant to ask you that, is there a pun in French that note meaning both grain and musical?
Sure.
Yeah, it's a nicer.
The idea of this book, this book, I don't care. Sure, I care. But the publisher is there, so I should not. The book, I don't care. The idea is more important than the book. The idea is, there is no doubt that there will be the future of food. This is why I was not against the subtitle. Otherwise, I would have tell them. The big question is, we have to be serious for some second. 10 billion people on this earth in 2050. Today we are 7, which means that we have to feed them, and we can feed only 6. So how is it possible? So first question, if we don't feed 4 billion people, there will be a big war or an epidemic. So I'm smiling, but it's very serious. The second thing is there is an energy crisis in front of us. And the third one is there is a water crisis.
Water crisis.
And probably I will be dead at that time, so I should not care, except that my children will be there. So we have to do something for. No, the old did the work for us, and we have a duty to do the work for the next.
Well, Hervé, that leads me to my big question about the book. It seems to me the book is proceeding on 2 levels at once. One is an aesthetic level, about the art of food, and the other is at the level you're talking about now, about the future, about the future of food. Would you explain to us what you mean by note cooking, the basic thing, because you emphasize, I think it's terribly important, you don't mean chemistry. This is you don't mean chemistry, you don't mean a mad scientist in a laboratory doing things. It's closer to the beginning, wouldn't you agree, of synthesized music is what you're...
Exactly. And if you hear the radio today, you hear only synthesizers, which means that in the 50s, when electroacoustic music began, people were saying, wow, innovative music, awful sound, and so on. And now it's every day, every second you have it. So this is why there is no doubt that it will be the future. For many reasons. You know, to my students, I teach them that when you have a project, you should have many branches at the same time. Imagine that you have a tree with only one trunk, and there is a storm, the trunk is broken, and the tree dies. If you have many branches, if this one is broken, the other one becomes a new trunk. So we need, if we have a big project, we need to have many goals. One of them is art, culinary art. Another one is feeding people. Another one is, and so on, and so on, and so on. For example, look at the detail, allergy, food allergies. Nowadays, it's more and more frequent. Imagine that you have a food allergy. It's very annoying. Then, with note by note cooking, I was ready to say music. Note by note cooking, you make the dish, but you forget about the compound that makes you allergic. And then you solve the problem. So it's obvious in a way. But we have to say what it is. So, up to now, you add meat, vegetables, fish, fruits, and eggs, more or less. And if you imagine that you have a carrot, in a carrot, you have compounds. They are not chemicals, because there is a definition of chemicals. They are compounds, and they are, by order of decreasing quantity, water, cellulose, pectin, sugars, which are 3 sugars, fructose, glucose, and sucrose, and amino acids. plus details, beta-carotene and so on and so on.
Important details, but
very important. Okay. Vitamin B12, vitamin C, malic acid, succinic acid, all these things. So for me, a carrot is only a building with this compound. And it's obvious that the goal is not to make a carrot, because the carrot exists already. The goal is to take the compounds, this from the carrots or from elsewhere, and you put them together and build a food, which means a shape, a consistency, an odor, a color, a taste, pungencies, freshnesses, astringencies, because there are many astringencies, you know. This is the discovery of the last years in all food science journals. And then it is food, and it's not so difficult. The only difficulty is to think about that. But when you admit the idea, you forget about carrots.
And so it's by note, just for to help the audience. The note by note, you mean exactly thinking about the compounds that make up the carrot. In the same way you might think about the colors on a painter's palette, okay. The way you think about the notes on
not the notes on the piano. It would be better to think on the, because the metaphor is slightly misleading. Right. It would be better to think on the pure waves of the synthesizer.
Right. Which then come together with overtones too.
Because you make the timbre, you say the timbre, and when you have the sound with a certain timbre, which is new, then you make the music. And it can be jingle bells.
Now, there are two things that are
which is boring.
two things that are terribly important, it seemed to me, that two polemics you were pursuing, not polemics, but points.
No polemics.
But it's useless.
You know, I don't have to convince anybody.
But there is something you do want to convince people of, that it's very counter many things people are inclined to say. And that is to think about additives, to think about the natural being in one place, and the artificial being somewhere else.
Please forget the word natural. If you look at the dictionary, that you do, you know that natural means when there was no intervention of humankind. If you do something, it is no longer natural. And then if you cook, it is not natural. There are no French fries in the trees in the white forest. And French fries, burgers are artificial. And artificial, the root is art, and it has to be good art, because we love good art and not bad art. And no food is natural. Natural is a word that you can hear when someone is going to sell you something.
Right. So that's very important. So that's very important basis.
Oh, very important. Right. And then if you admit that you are doing something artificial, I mean, you do art, and art. Look at when it's very funny. In France, after the First World War, jazz music arrived in France. New Orleans jazz music. So Louis Armstrong, ta-da, 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 ta-da. And people were saying, this is not music. They were upset. This is not music. They are awful Negroes people. No, people are very reactionary. And 10 years later, when you had free jazz, the jazz lover said, oh, this is not music. And 10 years later, when you are hard rock, the free jazz lover said, no, that's not music. And so on and so on. So it's boring. So please, let's admit that art can evolve, and there is no replacement. Because you can be a lover of Mozart, of Louis Armstrong, of Coltrane, of Lady Gaga, even Lady Gaga.
I'm still trying.
I never heard of Lady Gaga.
You make a very important point, though, which is when we think about the history, even just of French food, think about Carême, the one of the greatest makers of French food, and all of his food is, in a sense, denatured. It's all made.
It's raw.
Right. It's all made of. It's the greatest pastry chef who's ever lived.
By the way, it's true also that much before, in the 16th century, there was a big fight between two very important French chefs, and the youngest said, wow, all cuisine, it's heavy stuff, it's awful. You know, modern cuisine, it's every second there is something modern. What is modern?
Well, that's one question I wanted to ask you, Hervé. Why is it, do you think, that it's taken, some of you may have actually, I did a conversation not unlike this one with Nathan Myhrvold, who's, you know Nathan's work, and who's from Seattle, who's a companion compagnon de route here in America that loves the idea of modernist cuisine. And one question he asks is, and I wanted to ask you, is why many of the principles that you articulate in this book are sort of things that we know about, as you said, modern art, modern music. Why is food, why is the idea of modern food taking longer to be accepted?
The question of food is difficult. You know, when I propose molecular cooking, because modernist cuisine is only molecular cooking, I have to give a definition. Molecular gastronomy is a scientific activity, so it's not for chefs, it's for scientists, for chemists, for physical chemists. There is no chef doing molecular gastronomy. Now, when the chef, so in 1999, Estan Blumenthal was with me in Paris, and I invited Estan Blumenthal and Ferran Adrià to be part of a European program that was built around me. I wanted to give them some new technique. And new technique, this was molecular something. What was it? And Estan Blumenthal, he was there, he told me, Hervé, oh, I'm very happy to do molecular gastronomy. He said, no, Estan, you're not a scientist. Recently it was funny, for example, Ferran Adrià signed a paper in a scientific journal, but he does not know equations, this guy. So, and nothing against he has his name in the paper, but it's not true, he did not do the job. So, and Estan Blumenthal is a fellow of the Royal Society of Chemistry. This is crazy. Estan is brilliant, he's intelligent, he's my friend, but he's no
scientist.
He's not chemist. The scientists are scientists. It's not true that the chefs are scientists. They are not scientists. They are not, and I'm not a chef, I'm not an artist. So we have to keep the right categories, otherwise we cannot think. And Estan was there, and he told me, I'm happy to do molecular experimentation. Anyway, Estan, you are doing something, you are doing cooking. And suddenly I had an idea, I said, oh, you are doing molecular cooking. And you know, the definition of molecular cooking is cooking with modernized techniques. That's all. And modernist cuisine is molecular cooking, nothing all. Why is there another name for this thing? I don't understand. Anyway, it's over. Now we forget about molecular cooking. It's for grandfathers, and we move in note by note.
Note by note.
Only, nothing else.
Right. So you make a point.
Oh, by the way, I'm sorry,
please.
Because Pierre Gagnère, my friend Pierre Gagnère, one of the best chefs of the world, telling me, Hervé, you should not say that, because perhaps intelligent artists will be able to use even longer these ideas to make new things. So, and it's true in art. You can hear at Mozart, Debussy, and Louis Armstrong and John Coltrane at the same time. There is no replacement in art, there is an addition.
So we can eat choucroute or and come on. But would you describe, just so people have a specific sense of what this is about, you mentioned Pierre Gagnère, one of the greatest chefs in the world, and he did Note by Note 1. That was the first.
I wanted, because it's...
and describe for us what was Note by Note 1 was.
The story is the following. When I realized that it will be so important to the future, I mean, forget about modesty. I don't care about this kind of thing. There is something more important. But when I realized that it was important, Note by Note, cooking, I called Pierre, my wife was with me, we were on the harbor, it was 6 p.m. I did not know what time it was at the other side of the world, but I called Pierre with my mobile and said, Pierre, I want you to be the first chef serving Note by Note in a restaurant, because it will be an historical moment. And he did it later on. He needed 6 months to make it. Which was, you know, you don't know the words, you don't know the grammar, you don't know anything, so you have to learn. And even if you are a 3-star chef, you have to learn this new language. And finally, he served this dish. So this dish, Note by Note 1, there was a plate, good start. There were alginate pearls with...
Pearls of alginate.
Yes, which it's very easy to make. You take alginate, which is a polysaccharide, like starch, but it's not the same.
It's derived from algae? From the...
It's from an alga, yeah.
Right.
And so it's a polysaccharide. It's edible. You have to say it first. And you put a liquid. You put a liquid with alginate, and then you take some drops and you put it in a solution with calcium, which is good for the bones. Healthy food. No, I'm joking because we are in America, so healthy food.
It's very important.
When people smoke, drink beer, and have barbecue, which is carcinogenic, and they say we want healthy food. Drop the barbecue first. Anyway, so
you make the point that grilled food and smoked food is infinitely more dangerous for you than.
No, very bad. Very bad. I would propose a law that any citizen who is having barbecue should be forbidden to vote. Because then they take a good decision.
We don't need anything more to discourage people from voting.
But there are better ideas than making law against people. We have to promote the good and not.
But go on with note by note one. What were the others? So
there was a pearls in a liquid. It was a thin liquid, I mean, like a loaf. And then there were 5 discs of crystalline part, which was peligoglucose. Peligoglucose means it's like more or less like a caramel, but it's made from pure glucose, which are, please have near your stove a bag of pure glucose. Glucose is wonderful because it's not sweet, it's mouthfeel. You see, it's like I don't know, make the test. Now you should buy a big bag of glucose.
You said we should lose all of our prejudice against glucose. Glucose is very good for us.
We have plenty of glucose in our blood, and in the carrot, we have the main sugar is glucose. In all plant tissues, you have glucose. Okay, so you have glucose. There was a slight acidity. In this case, it was tartric acid. Tartric acid is it's the crystals that you have at the bottom of wine bottles when there are wine in the fridge, let's say. And this acidity, indeed, it's not tartric acid, it's tartric salt. But tartric acid is a very funny acidity. It's elegant. Acetic acid is like you cut something, and I don't like it. But tartric acid, it's wonderful.
It's the acid we taste in wine, isn't it?
Not only because you have succinic acid, you have malic acid, you have lactic acid, you have tartric, but this one of them. I love that. And then there was some glucose, tartric acid. I don't remember the recipe. The recipe is online for free. So, and then you have the disc. So there was, when does how do you say? When you have puff pastry, how do you say it in English? Crisp? No, not crisp.
Crisp. Yeah, crisp.
Yes, but you know the difference between cracks and crisp. Crisp. There are many. Do you know how to make puff pastry?
Flaky, yes.
Okay, flaky, exactly.
Flaky, thank you.
Thank you very much. Flaky means many flakes are breaking, which they are thin, and there is a very small sound. So instead of having crack, which is heavy, with a it's true. And this is when it's so good. So it's not small is beautiful. At lunch we had a big pleasure. I was invited by Jean-Jean. It was wonderful.
Just today.
Today. And the Julienne and the Brunoise were wonderful. I mean, very, very thin, very delicate. I mean, it was food for ladies. Which is the best, of course. We are roots, but no, it was wonderful. And we have the same feeling with these slices. And on top there was a sherbet. It was not exactly a sherbet or an ice cream, I don't know.
So just so that so everyone understands, because it's always hard to describe a taste.
We have an idea.
Oh, do you? What a good idea.
Because we have to learn the notes. So I will put on this plate first. No, we are going to organize the notes. Would you prefer first pungency or odor? Who is voting for pungency? Or odors? So pungencies. And odors? No, pungencies. There is so we are living in a democratic country. So pungencies first. So this one is a compound, a pure compound, except that it is too pungent, and then it has been dissolved into a product which is flour that has absolutely no. So I put a teeny quantity there. My advice, please, is you take your finger and you take a teeny quantity. Two grains. Okay. Now, on the same plate, number 2, the number 11, because we have to give names. if I tell you that this one is piperine, it's a pungency of black pepper. Okay? But should we call that piperine or number 11? This is a debate. I don't know. So I put some piperine. For piperine there is no problem. Except that for the next one, yeah, the number 12, the real name is allyl isothiocyanate. So it's too long. So either we call it number 12 or thio. Thio, 12. Okay.
And 12 is a very romantic name. I often say to my wife. 12.
Very
good.
So
try this. It's
so you take the teeny quantity of
but Hervé, just forgive me for being a bore.
We have to test that. Don't take too much. The sensation will come sometime later. And what will be better is that you will be able to perceive that the sensation don't come at the same place of your mouth. And this means that there is no pungency, but pungencies, which is incredible because it means new notes on the piano. Instead of having a triangle, bling, 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 you have many notes on a Steinway piano.
So the thing about the first, like Garnier's first note by note, about all the note by note cooking is, it's exactly like creating new chords that have never been heard before. It had elements of sweetness, elements of acidity, elements of feel, elements of texture, just the way the food of our classic cuisine does, but they're unheard. It's like the harmonies of Ravel or Debussy. They're like new chords that come and then...
It's a new art. It's a new art. I mean, you can...
It's built on the same, it's built on similar principles, but it's all a new harmony.
And it is very funny. We had 2 events in Montreal, Canada. They were press...
My hometown.
Okay, press conferences with about... the first day there were 150 journalists, and the second day 55. The first day I talked to the chef, you play with that, but I want to hear innovative music. And the result was the following. So we were serving some boucher. The first game, half of the group said, wow, it's awful. And the second half said, wow, incredible. So we served the second boucher, and now a new half said, wow. And the second said, wow. And for that, my wife liked a dish that I found no interest. And for myself, I had a dish. There is a blue picture somewhere in the book. There is a spoon, no? Yes, it is in I can show. So you see, for this one, you see, the blue thing. The blue thing, for me, it was incredible because it was fresh, it was intelligent, we could perceive it was a game with textures, there is a difference between texture and consistency. With consistency, it was very, very good. By the way, the freshness was very easy to make in this dish. Here it is. Please don't pour any drop on the floor, otherwise the Maison Française will smell for years.
By the way, this is a picture here of note by note 1 of Garnier's. It may be unprepossessing looking, but it's like E equals MC squared. You have to understand everything that
and you know, now, as Pierre was the first to make a note by note dish, it means that America is late, like with Sputnik. So please move on.
Let me ask you, Hervé.
I should not make jokes like this probably in America.
Thinking about
the publisher is very upset. It will be a failure because this guy cannot behave correctly. Or this guy is very serious also. So. Please, I beg your pardon, I should not make jokes. Never.
Never joke in America.
No.
Never joke in America about food.
No.
Hervé, I did a conversation, not unlike this one, a few weeks ago in Brooklyn with Carlo Pedrini, you know, the leader of the slow food movement. We had snails on our lapels and
I love snails with garlic butter.
Yes, and you know that the argument, the claims of the slow food movement are very counter to yours. How would you say, they all say, and I'm sure you've heard this a million times, the only salvation for the table, for food, is to go backwards, is to revive and recuperate.
It's go forward, always. By the way, it's impossible to go backward. It's impossible, so let's move. And let's move in the, it's true, but let's move in the right direction, which means that we need more knowledge in order to be able to choose correctly. No. I mean, by the way, look, remember in literature, the old against the new. Always the new win, because the old die.
So your point is, you share some of the same values, right? You want people to enjoy food, you want food to be a pleasure.
I'm not sure. I want the humankind being able to eat. And there is no, nowadays, today, there is no other possibility than avoiding spoilage. It can change in the future, I don't know. The energy issue can be solved by nuclear fusion. And we are quite near from it, perhaps. I don't know. I don't have any crystal ball. But for food production, we cannot increase the area of cultivated land. We cannot increase much the output, which means that the only solution, and which has been recognized by the Academy of Agriculture, is to avoid spoilage. Today, in America and in France, 45% of the food production is spoiled. So it means that if we could avoid that, we would be able today to feed 11 billion, and the problem is solved. So the problem is to avoid spoilage, and for this goal, we have to take out water of the food ingredients at the farm. Because this product can be stored forever, there is no problem. And by the way, they will not spoil. And the problem is solved.
So the act of
would you
synthesizing...
would you like me to send another bottle?
Yes, absolutely. I think everyone's...
we can send many.
One of the things that occurred to me reading your book, Hervé, is that your approach to note-by-note approach is very much like perfume making, isn't it?
Exactly. For 1 hour.
Yes.
But for taste also. No, this is a funny story. Funny. I'm not sure if it's funny, but excuse me, I don't use that. I apologize. I beg your pardon. It's not very polite, and I'm trying to be polite. Not successful, but anyway.
It's very much like cinema scope.
I see you. I'm with you. And at the back also, they are very far away. No, what did I say?
Perfume.
Perfume. Okay, I mean, when I say something, it's true. So, it was a story. It's a true story. I was working with chef of the Top Blanche International one evening, and they asked me to come and to teach them how to cook tomatoes. So because I'm very rational mind, you see, I said, okay, we are going to begin by choosing the shape of the dish. When the shape is decided, we are going to make the consistency, and when the consistency is done, this is what I'm going to do in my future lecture in New York. I will have the possibility to do experiments with this. I will demonstrate. Today, they did not want me to do that, so my hands are fixed. Anyway, so when you have the consistency, then you put the color. When you have the color, you decide for the taste. When you have the taste, you decide for the odor, which is easy. I have another one. No, please don't look at the back of the bottle because it's not true. For example, the first one about herbaceous has nothing to do with herbaceous. It was a compound called 1-hexane-3-ol. Another one was an aldehyde. A third one, so you don't care. You say number 12, 15. So in this evening, so I was proposing the chef to do rational thing, and so they told me that what do you mean by amylopectin? Amylopectin is very easy. Cornstarch is almost pure amylopectin. Okay, so cornstarch is a compound, more or less. Okay, so I said, okay, let's use cornstarch. I put some cornstarch in the vessel, then I put some water, and then I said, now we are going to put proteins. I said, proteins, what is it? So I put egg white powder. Okay, we get the dough, and one chef said, what if we cook that? Okay, let's put it in the microwave, and we got a product with bubble, and the chef said, oh, I have an idea. So he took the dough, he made a small baguette, knife, and then he put it in the oven, he had a mini baguette. He was very happy. I said, but we have to be rational. No, this is not the way the artists are doing. The artists think by metaphors.
Yes.
And we think that rational. And this is very funny to see how different way of behaving in front of this food can be observed. I'm always surprised. But there is no rule, you do what you want.
One of my favorite passages from the book, Hervé, comes up, and you're talking about...
Oh, you know, he has one of his preferred passages. So, wow.
But I think it's an interesting insight, because people think of what you're doing as being in any sense clinical. But you write here, the work of a truly... I had the idea of trying to work from a pure feeling in making a menu. After all, the work of a truly talented chef is animated by personal emotion. Not culinary emotion, mind you, for that would unavoidably lead him to reproduce something very classic and familiar, but instead a feeling such as the one he experienced as a child. For example, going out to pick mushrooms for the first time with his grandfather. At the edge of the forest, the boy comes upon a magical scene. The tree trunks bathed in dark shadow, the lush green of the moss, the rays of light filtering through the branches. It was just this emotion that Nicolas Bernardet wished to convey, as it happens. And during the meal that followed, I saw men and women with tears of joy in their eyes.
That was incredible. People, of joy, I'm not sure. No, they were tears of emotion. Joy is too much, it's emotion. I don't know if someone among you ever had tears when eating. It's very strange. You cannot say that you are...
I've often had tears when pain, but...
No, it's very strange. Did you ask?
Oh, well, yes, I've had that experience, I think, 3 times in my life.
Oh, it's not.
Yes, in my life as an eater, when things were so beautiful and surprising. But some of that has to do with the context in which it takes place. But I just wanted to make the point here, Hervé, that your ambitions for note-by-note cooking are not clinical, they're to expand the emotional range of the chef. Right.
Only one. The question of feeding humankind is more important.
Right.
Of course, there is no... We can, even if we starve, we can make music. This is more or less true. With food, the comparison is also. By the way, please, I have to keep the bottle back because I need them for the next lecture. But anyway, I pass them. Okay?
But one of the things that
but metaphor, there is the understanding of cooking can be very different. One morning, I came to Pierre Gagnère and I said, Pierre, okay, imagine that you have guests at your restaurant. Some of them like more salt and some of them like less salt. How do you choose? It was incredible. This guy is brilliant. He told me, okay, nobody would ask Mozart one violin more. It's true. So it's not a question of a cursor with plus or minus. It's a question of making an art piece. And you know, I'm trying to be smarter tomorrow. I mean, I want that tomorrow I will be smarter than today. So how can I do? Do you want to be smarter tomorrow? Or?
I would like to be smart today, if I could make it.
Okay, so what is your method? So my method is to ask smart people what is their method, their ultimate method. So I'm asking this method for Nobel Prize winner in physics, in chemistry, and they tell me. So I can share this information if you want, but today is not the case, the place. But one day I realized that I forgot to ask Pierre about this. How are you intelligent in cooking? And Pierre has this wonderful answer. He said, okay, there is a Japanese writer, Suzume Natsuki, the pillow of herbs or herbs pillow, I don't know. And when Pierre told me, when I heard this name for the first time, of course I bought the book immediately, but it reminded me of when I was young. I was fishing fish very early, you know, in the countryside. You are in the middle of the countryside. It's wet because it's early in the summer. You have the rosé, I don't know how to say rosé. The dew. So the herbs have dew, and you catch a fish, and you have the fish, you put it into this strong earth with dew. It's cold, and suddenly you hear the bells ringing at the village nearby. And he said, you see, this is some emotion, and I make a dish out of it. So this is more or less the same story, that is by care, so I don't care.
One of the other things in the book, you talk a great deal in the first part of the book about the compounds of cooking. But then in the second part, it fascinated me, you talk also about the physiology of taste. And you tell us that what we think we know about taste on the tongue and the palate are completely false. Can you explain?
Completely false, completely. I mean, it depends of your background, let's say. If you think that there are 4 tastes, you're away.
Most people do, right? There's sweet, sour.
And the best demonstration is that ethanol is not salty, is not sour, is not sweet, and is not bitter. Ethanol is ethanol. If you have licorice, licorice is not salty, not sweet, is not bitter, and is not ethanol. And we know, the physiologists know, that there are probably an infinite number of tastes, but with 10 dimensions. You know, with color you have 3. This is not true, because we, the sensory physiologists make discoveries every year. The latest is the discovery of a taste of calcium and a hunger of calcium. Our body can be hungry of calcium even if we don't know about that, which is very strange. And we move in a certain decision because we are hungry of calcium.
So we move towards dairy foods?
Yeah. And it's very important to know that, because if you imagine that you are playing the piano and you don't know that there is a new note there, and you will not play with that. So we have to know more. And it's very funny, because in 1992, when I was organizing the first HA meeting on molecular gastronomy, there was a friend from a sensory part, and I told him there are no 4 tastes, and he said, yes, there are 4 tastes, there are 4 tastes. 3 years later, he was saying, oh yes, there are 5 tastes, there are 5 tastes. With umami does not exist.
Oh, it does not?
No. I can tell you the true story. The true story is the following. I was invited in Tokyo, and people from big company, I will not tell you the name because it would make advertising. They asked me to go into the oldest dashi maker of Tokyo. In the car, there was a press officer. And the press officer gave me scientific paper that she signed. I am against the press officer, of course, and she's not a scientist. So probably this company paid for having this paper published, which is wrong. By the way, these people said, oh, umami. So we came to the dashi maker, and the old guy putting kombu algae, putting with hot water like tea, and then there is a brew. And I said to the people of the company, do you know what the content of that? And they said, this is alanine, of course water, but alanine and glutamic acid. Alanine is an amino acid which has a special taste, and glutamic acid has another taste. And I told them, okay, but it's not elementary because you have 2 tastes. It's obvious. And then we went to this company and they said, oh, umami is MSG. I said, no, because you told me that it was alanine plus glutamic acid. And then, I don't have anything to sell. They are. And umami is not true, does not exist. And I will prove now.
Oh, just everyone follow everyone.
By the way,
we learned that here tonight.
By the way, there are good news, because any amino acid has a special taste, which means that on your piano, you have the 20 amino acids instead of just umami. That does not exist.
So this is a very important point. So for your vision of...
This is something I'm not finding at all.
Your vision of cooking is there's truly an infinite or nearly infinite gamut of range of taste, far larger than we think. So there are many more stops on our organ.
By the way, the big difficulty is that now we have to learn, which is not so difficult because you just mix the compound and you get it, but we have to learn to make a real piece. I mean, if you learn new words, for example, theater, museum, soil, you could say theater, soil, museum, but it does not mean anything. So we have to learn how to make the sentences. So we have probably to learn the grammar. We have to learn, and then the grammar is not enough because in literature, as you know, we need first the art and then the technique.
Yes. Well, that's the question I want to ask you about. Okay. How is the world of note-by-note cooking growing?
American people will be very angry at me because I have to tell them that in Copenhagen Culinary School, 1,500 students at school are having this book as a textbook now. And now America is very late. So
we're behind.
Move.
Why is it that
By the way, no, sorry, it's the same in Portugal. You know, Portugal is not a so well advanced country compared to America. So, I mean, I have nothing against Portugal, but it's true that in Estoril and in Lisbon, they decided to move. In France for a long time. But you know, France is the hub of the universe.
If someone wanted to taste note-by-note cooking in France, where could they go these days?
Sorry?
Is there an endroit, is there a place in France where a restaurant in France?
No, this is why I'm so sad. And this was part of my discussion with Jean-Jean
this afternoon.
This afternoon at 3. I told him I dream of the day, it will come soon, of the day when one young chef, it will be a young chef, I can predict, will open a restaurant, and this guy will tell to the world this is note by note. And he will be honest, he will cook only note by note. It will be difficult, it has to be good, but it will come soon probably. We need a young guy, you know, it's like for music or for painting. The old for them, you know, when you have a restaurant, you have to be safe. I mean, you are responsible for your staff, you cannot fail. So it's probably easier when you begin. You have nothing to lose.
Right.
So last month with Pierre Gagnère, with Pierre we have very regularly a discussion. So we come in the morning at 7:30.
In Paris?
Yes, right, of course.
Right.
When you discuss food, it's Paris.
I'll buy that.
Yeah. So we sit, and every month for now 16 years, I'm giving an idea to Pierre, and Pierre, I make a text. Pierre puts the text on the internet site for free for everybody, and he has the duty to put recipes using my idea. So now, for some months, I'm showing these products, and Pierre, I explain you that this one is relaxing, capsaicin, and so on and so on. And Pierre makes recipes, not only himself, the staff, and generally having the recipe for 1 month in the restaurant somewhere in the world. And recently... He
has many restaurants spread around.
Oh yes, he has London, Tokyo, Dubai, Las Vegas, Berlin...
and as well,
many. Not New York, but in Paris. Anyway, and Pierre said to Michel Nave, the executive chef, okay, we have to move. And Pierre himself recognized that it was difficult for him, and he said, we have to select in the team one young guy. He will be responsible of the exploration because he will have the possibility to do. He said, you know, modern art is sometimes difficult to grasp.
Yes.
So we have to be educated.
So you're looking for a Picasso.
Sure. Imagine that I take the pastrami out of your life, you will be sad. In the future, there will be some Wöhler sauce or some new taste, and children will be accustomed to that. They will learn. So we need more or less one generation.
Just the way that our ears are accustomed to the advanced harmonies of...
And the taste, because we have to create new music. You know, when you make music, modern music, not all of them are successful, but imagine that one of them is successful. For example, Imagine by the Beatles, for example, everybody here can hear Imagine. So it's not new notes, it's new music. So we have to create new music that will be associated with new flavors.
New flavors.
Please give them back to the end.
I want to open up the floor to questions from the audience, but I know that Michael wants to join us too, so maybe...
by the way, this one is more or less camembert cheese taste. No.
One of my favorites.
There's one.
What about the...
Someone else was raising here.
Explain how you get from this to something that looks like the pictures in your book. I don't think I get this yet.
Okay. Did you understand? How do you go from the salts and the liquids and the powders to finished dishes?
Oh, it's very easy. Look at look at the blue.
I saw.
So the blue means, you know, for food you need the main nutriments are proteins, saccharides, and lipids. Okay, so in the future we will need the three of them. we are apes, you know. I'm not you because you are wonderful. I'm gorilla. And so we need these compounds. We evolve with these compounds. Biology of evolution is very important. We cannot make easily something different. And then in this part, imagine that you take a vessel. This is the experiment that I will make the next day. You take a vessel, you take proteins. They can be protein from peas, from egg white, but I would prefer from plant proteins. Because in the future there will not be meat enough for everybody, and we have to learn to use plant proteins. So let's admit that you have a white powder with plant proteins. You know that meat is 60% proteins and 40% water. So you take 6 spoons of proteins, you take 4 spoons of water, and you have a dough. Now if you want to improve, you remember that in your steak, in the steakhouse you have a lot of fat, you put oil, then you mix, you put that in the pan and you have a steak. Now of course it has no taste, so you turn it in blue with some blue colorants that you extract from blackberries, blueberries, or cranberries, or I don't care. By the way, if you want to have a better color, instead of only putting one color, you make a mix. Because you know, for example, the painters know very well that when you want to paint the leaves of trees, you have to put some red in the green. Because the leaves contains both chlorophylls, many of them, plus carotenoids, which means yellow, orange, red. And then in order to get this blue, you have to put many colors at the same time. Then you have the taste, amino acids and so on. Glucose, very important. And then, instead of cooking directly, imagine that you make a thin sheet on a transparent film, and with your comb, if you cook, you will make like a surimi. You know, surimi is like crab. And depending on the way you cook, you have different size of the fillets, let's say, and then you roll it, you cook it, you fry, I don't care. And then for the sherbet, it's so easy that I don't establish. So this dish was
so through a series of regular steps.
We have to conclude. It is very simple. Practically, the most difficult thing is to think. I mean, the most difficult thing is to admit that we can go in this direction for daily food, not only for foodies. I don't care what food is. I consider our children very important.
Thank you.
By the way, we have to.
You're welcome, please.
Please, I'm not doing that.
Michael, I wanted to ask you if you could tell us a little bit about your own introduction to thinking about molecular gastronomy, then about note-by-note cooking.
By the way, excuse me, we met now for the first time. And when I got the books last week, because it was last week, I was surprised. I said, Daniel Boulou, I know this man, I love him. And he was this wonderful guy, so very friendly thing. So now I'm a new friend. Wow! New friend.
We love the men who lure us.
It's an honor for me because, I mean, I'm trying to think of how long ago it was, about 15 years ago, when I first started reading about these crazy retreats happening on a mountain in Sicily somewhere. And the very first sort of whispers of this term, molecular gastronomy. And ever since then, I had all your books. You're gonna have to sign them while you're in town. For me, so, I mean, I've been reading and following everything that everybody's been doing since almost as long as I've been.
No. The only question that I ask you is, when are you opening a note-by-note restaurant?
Baby steps. But to answer Adam's question, I'm a pastry chef by training. And I think I'm already hardwired to begin to understand what this is all about. Because say if I'm making a soup, I'm a savory chef making a soup, I can taste it and adjust it and tweak it from beginning to end. Whereas if I'm making a cake, first I'm combining ingredients in a state that's not really palatable, and then I'm putting it in the oven, and then I have to know what's gonna happen 30 minutes later when I take it out. I can't take the cake out of the oven halfway through and say it needs a pinch more baking soda. It doesn't really work that way. So I think pastry chefs are already hardwired to think this way. So, you know, and something I've been doing a lot the last few years, and I'm certainly never, people say, oh, you're a scientist. No, this guy is. If anything, I'm a technician that applies what people like Hervé do.
Or an artist.
Or an artist, sure. Some people don't take that.
Continue, Michael. I think it's a very important point. Oddly enough, I just thinking in a piece that appeared in the New Yorker today, that pastry chefs have traditionally been the leaders, actually, in the avant-garde of cooking, because they, as you say, they're used to thinking unnaturally.
Karen said
yes.
He was a pastry chef.
He was,
exactly.
I mean, he codified a lot of what we still do today.
So it was easier for you to make that imaginative leap than many of your.
Sure. I mean, when Nathan Mervold's modernist cuisine first came out, I kind of gave him grief a little bit. Like, there's no pastry stuff. When are you going to do the pastry?
Right.
And he's like, the pastry chefs don't need this right away. Right. Of course, now we all know that he enlisted one of the best pastry chefs in the country, and they're working on a bread book.
But birthday cake is already an alchemical thing. It's already a denatured thing.
Absolutely,
okay.
Absolutely.
So it was easier for you to make that.
Sure, and also as a pastry chef, I'm not so much concerned about the anatomy of something. Sure, you can the anatomy.
Yeah.
Like, sure, you can put a fish in a blender, but for the most part, a savory chef is going to respect the anatomy to some degree, whereas chocolate, sugar, butter, flour, respect the anatomy. Piece of fish. Respect the anatomy.
Respect the
shape.
In other words,
I'm hesitating with the word respect for a very long time. This is why. No, I respect people. I don't respect the chicken when I roast it.
Not the animal itself, but the form that it takes. Like I said, you could put a fish in a blender. But
this is an important point, right? You feel that's a sentimental idea to talk about.
No, this is funny because many people tell me the question, what about deconstructing food? And I say, it's not very important. We are building food. We are not deconstructing food, we are building food. And the pastry chef do that. They build the cake with levels and levels and levels and the small guy at the top. It's building. Right. And now we have to build the taste, we have to build the flavor, we have to build the astringencies, which is much possibilities in building.
So, and when people talk about, oh, you should respect the ingredients, respect the meats, it doesn't, for you, that's...
I don't understand. You know, but I'm a child, so this is why I'm behaving very correctly. Ask questions, does God exist? For example, this is one question.
Just a chicken exists, right? Yeah.
Respect.
So that whole way of talking about food is not something that makes any sense to you?
Asking the question, you know the importance of words, they are very important. So they have a meaning, and nobody can tell the meaning of the word. The word is a common language, so we have to share some experience. If I don't understand the word because it has been turned, I say, well, I don't understand. I mean, by the way, in English language it's very difficult. So.
Maybe I could just not to interrupt Michael, what you were saying, because this is a fascinating line of inquiry. So maybe I could put it in slightly different words. I think when people say, I respect the chicken or I respect the fish, they mean that the process of evolution, right, has produced fauna, creatures on the earth that have very complicated histories, very complicated lives, very complicated flavors. And the flavors that have been created by that process, we don't have to call it natural, but whatever we want to call it, by that biological process, are intrinsically interesting, are inherently valuable. And that we should...
No, interesting, yes.
Inherently interesting, and that we should have great regard for them. Do you think that's what you...
Great regards, I mean, look, at some time there were dinosaurs. They I don't care. No. I want to respect the human community. I'm thinking of respecting the animal community. I'm not sure. I'm thinking of respecting the plant community because I don't see any difference between the plant and an animal. I'm not Buddhist, but I just have questions. When people are so sure, I say, please, let's have a question first.
No, absolutely.
And this is why I'm not sure. I'm not sure of many things. So when there is a strong fact, they say, okay, it's a relief, we have a strong fact. And by the way, I come back to the question of 10 million people on the earth. This is a strong fact because the prediction has been made by anybody, and we come between 9 and 11. That's a fact. And this is why we have to focus on that. Now on art, when I'm trying, like you did, when I'm eating some wonderful food, this is a fact. And then I'm interested by this fact. But the process of evolution, I mean, it's very interesting for a scientific study, but all the mistakes that were made before.
So I just want to just say, because it's fascinating that your whole way of thinking about food is very, very different from the way that someone like Carlo Pedrini thinks about food. You don't have food, right? So it's very. I just want to clarify.
No, but by the way, we have to, because you cannot get ready as a political project.
Right.
I'm also one. It is very different. My project, that I'm sharing this project, you have to know that I'm alone. I'm not alone. Sometimes, there is Hervé This, the guy with the crazy chemist. Okay, forget about that. Sometimes I'm the president of the food section of the Academy of Agriculture in France, and my responsibility is much different than the guy. So now I take this position, and I tell you that we have this question of feeding humankind. It's a serious problem, and of course art is there, it's very good, very beautiful and so on, but we have this serious problem. So we have to discuss first this serious problem. So the love of food that we can have if we are gourmand, okay, it's all right, but there is a serious problem. And the only possibility apparently is to avoid spoilage. And then we have, in order to avoid spoilage, not by not project, not by not cooking, but project, because it's broader, is to take out water from the product at the farm. Because then you can transport something that will not spoil, which means that you make new products. It's not only drying, it's not making a powder of raspberries. It's better to fractionate or to crack like cracking the oil. Then you have new products. This product can be stored, can be used at any time. You don't need a fridge, which consumes a lot of energy. And you have this product. Now, the big issue is that if the farmers are making these new products, they get richer. And the farmers are responsible for the food security of countries plus the environment. So if you are a rich farmer, then you can secure the environment and the food security of nations. And it is very important. I don't care about slow food. I care about enriching the farmers in order to make my children and yours able to eat tomorrow. And it's my problem. I'm sorry,
No, that's enormously important.
Like I'm convinced.
So the fight against, the fight for no cooking is also the fight against spoilage, and is also.
It is. You know, 45% of food in industrial country is spoiled, which is crazy,
And by using all of these unique techniques to withdraw water, to do those things, is the only path towards feeding.
And the techniques are there already. For example, when I did my course, I'm doing every year a free public course that lasts between 2 and 3 days on a specific topic every year, which is my research. And 3 or 4 years ago, it was on by note. I invited some company to give me some hardware. We put it on the desk of the amphitheater. I had some carrots. We centrifugated the carrots, then we had the juice. We put it in the machine. We had the amino acid sugar. It was demonstrated in 5 minutes. So it's easy. So we have the possibility to enrich a farmer, and this is very important. Of course, the agro-business, of course, they will use it. But if the farmer moves, they will be able to get richer. And the terroir, by the way, is very, I don't have the box today, but very frequently in my kitchen I'm using some phenolics from Syrah grapes. They are wonderful. And the terroir...
The grapes of the Rhone Valley.
There is no odor, only you take a quarter of a teaspoon in water and you have a wine sauce more or less. And the terroir are technical details. They are present in this box, which means that you don't lose the terroir. Depending on the way, if you cultivate Syrah or Grenache or Pinot, you will not have the same phenolics, And depending on the year, and depending on the soil, if it's uphill or downhill, we not have the same. So
we can preserve all of those
we have
qualities.
the same one, no problem about that. And it's very good news.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Michael, you were saying.
I'm sorry.
That was a long time ago.
I'm sorry because during this lecture, that's 3 days, I have to speak during 3 days. That is why when you press the button,
It's great. No, no, it's.
we're trying to give information.
We're very, very
Michael, go on.
I mean, for me, you know, the first introduction to this way of thinking, and I think this is maybe the genesis of the idea of no cooking, was your complex dispersed systems.
No, it was in Scientific American paper in 1994. In the last column of the article, I said, I dream of the day when we are going to use compound. So in 1994. But I lectured after 1996, then there was the bug of the year 2000, and people were upset, so I dropped that, and again in 2004. DSF, which is you have to know, DSF is a calculation that I invented in order to describe forms, emulsion, and so on. So you can produce an infinite number of new colloidal systems.
So to me that was a revelation.
Put that into your own cooking.
It's basically, okay, say whipped cream.
Right.
It's oil or fat dispersed in the water plus a gas.
That's what it is.
But now we start plugging in other things. What could be fat? What could be water? Now there are, you know, the milk proteins help, and the particular kind of fat that's in milk help create whipped cream. So with a little bit of engineering, you could make whipped cream out of carrot juice and pistachio oil. I don't know. So that really, when I first started to kind of let that seep in, that opened up the floodgates for me. So it's been something I've been thinking about. I mean, I only just finished the book a few months ago, so I'm still absorbing and digesting.
By the way, if you want the recipe, I give the recipe of it's called chocolate chantilly. You take a pan, you put 200 grams of water. Of course, it could be orange juice or what orange you choose.
What kind of orange?
What
kind of liquid? It could be anything from a fruit juice to alcohol.
Which one?
For chocolate, we'll say orange juice.
Okay, so you take 1 glass of orange juice in a pan. Then you add 225 grams of chocolate, which is fat, sugar. You heat under the pan, you make an emulsion, and when you have this emulsion, you put it on ice cubes and you whip, and you get whipped cream, except that it is not cream, it's chocolate chantilly. And you can make the same with foie gras, with cheese, and probably the only one of these herbs to have succeeded to make it with olive oil. So you have olive oil chantilly, so it's an olive oil transformed into a foamy texture like a chantilly.
An olive oil chantilly whipped cream, yes.
So
olive oil,
I didn't say crazy.
No, it's we're not all that much time, so I do want to open up. I know many of you have questions, so let me turn to the audience and take your questions.
Yes, there is a question there.
Right here. Yes. Right here. Yes.
You talk about the reduction of spoilage by diluting water, but that takes a lot of energy to remove water, doesn't it?
No, yes and no. If you dry, yes, because the latent heat of evaporation of water is 2,350 kilojoules per mole, which is a lot. But if you use nanofiltration, it's very safe. In some carafe, on your table, like gravity, you have the filtration. Nanofiltration is a very mature process. And for example, it is used for all the tap water of the city of Angers in France, 300,000 people, you see. And by the way, when you transport a carrot, you take a 10-ton truck full of carrots, you transport water every day, which is crazy.
I mean, in terms of energy use, it's great.
Yes, and by the way, I have to tell you, I have to admit that I don't know the answer to your question. And this is why I was cautious at the beginning, speaking of nuclear fusion, because there is a possibility for energy. For food production, there is no possibility.
There's of expanding food production.
Yes, at the moment. We have a perspective for energy, we don't have the perspective for food production. And then if we have energy, then we can make
food production.
Of course, the big issue is that we are too many on this earth. So the contraceptive pills for men or women would be the solution. People are not ready to hear about that. It's a fact. We have to have less children. But people are not ready with that. I'm sorry.
Over here, we have a question? I thought I saw a hand. Lady here?
Yeah, I was wondering, what do you think of the word fresh as applied to food?
Very good.
Does it exist?
Yes, it does. It does when you consider, I mean, imagine that you take a cucumber,
Yeah.
it is not stored for 2 days at the supermarket, you peel it and you have an odor of freshness. And then fresh means many things at the same time. It can mean freshly prepared, like a baguette out of the oven. It can be, I know that because we had a PhD recently on this question. We have the freshness, which is the stimulation of the trigeminal nerve.
Trigeminal, that's a newly discovered.
No. We have a nerve from the back. We have a nerve for olfaction, we have a nerve for taste, but there is a nerve from the back of the brain. We have 3 branches in the nose, mouth, and so on. And this nerve recognizes pungencies and freshnesses. And the stimulation by menthol, for example, menthol has a mint odor, but also has a fresh. So this is something new.
But we don't understand, right here, that we don't fully understand yet how the trigeminal nerve functions and tastes.
Oh, there are questions, but in science there are only questions. And there is the fact that if you put you have a chewing gum with mint, it's fresh, you see. So, and then you have the cucumber that is being fresh. When you get some plant products freshly, then there is a specific batch of compounds that escapes. For example, in the herbaceous, you see, and the perfumers know that well. When you're a perfumer, when you compose a perfume, you have the light notes, the medium notes, and the background notes. And the light notes generally are fresh. So you see, fresh is a complex thing. That this is my answer.
No, that's
Is
good.
it all right?
Thank you.
So freshness is a complicated thing. It's not wait.
There are many things. There are many things at the same time. Yeah.
Gentlemen here.
An accomplished cook has, let's say, you know, the typical ingredients in the pantry and so many cans and so many pots. What would be necessary to set up that kind of cognate operation with note by note? How many notes? You know, what kind of pan do you need? You know, what could do it?
For the bulk, because we should not forget the bulk, which is nutrition, we need oil, proteins, and polysaccharides. For the oil, it's oil, okay. For the proteins, there are some proteins that coagulate and proteins that don't coagulate. Of course, we can improve considering the kind of amino acids in order to be healthy. This will be part of this is part of the work of my colleague in nutrition sciences. And now for polysaccharides, we have amylose, amylopectin, cellulose, chitosan, some of them. So let's say now 20 bottles or 20 boxes. By the way, they could be beautiful boxes, ceramics, you know, the Alsatian ceramic, the grey one with the blue tristle in the flower. So you have beautiful, like you have for pastry, so beautiful boxes in your kitchen. Beautiful, so you say, wow, so you have collection, and so you have 20, then now you have the taste, so there are 20 amino acids, let's admit 50. Then we need the pungency and freshness, probably 10 or 20. The colors, 20 or 30, I don't know. And the odor, the more you have, the better. So you can have 20 like this, but it's not enough because you miss the mushroom, you miss anything. So imagine that we have 200, and then we would probably, I don't know. I'm very happy with the question because I should answer most of the time, I don't know. The Note by Note project is a project we have to work collectively in order to make it. I'm not alone in this project. You know, for the Note by Note project that we have in Europe, with the European Committee, there are probably 20 laboratories, all Europe working together. So it's not a personal enterprise. At the beginning it was, but now now people are convinced that there is a question of nutrition, there is a question of allergies, there is a question of feeding the humankind. It's not, this book is small, but probably it's much more important than the size of the number of pages. And we have to develop in the future.
Let me take some from the side and I'll come back to you. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I think that Adam might have tried to ask you this question earlier. I'm not sure, maybe I'm inventing this, but what is the role of taste in
Very
knowing
important.
cooking?
Very important. I mean, first of all, let's be clear about words. When you eat a banana, you have the flavor of banana. I'm using the British Standard Dictionary definition. Okay? So in flavor, it is a synthetic sensation. You have with the banana, you have the flavor of banana. The flavor of banana is based on many things, which is consistency, because depending on the consistency, you don't have the same flavor. Taste, the taste buds, odors, trigeminal, astringencies, and almost everything. And even words. I'm very happy of your question, thank you. I invite you, all of you, to close your eyes. We are going to make a funny experiment. Please close your eyes. All of you, all of you, all of you, close your eyes, okay? Now, think of a lemon. You see the lemon? You have to look at a yellow lemon. Do you see it? Mm-hmm. Say the word lemon, please. Lemon. So now, nearby, put a lime and say lime. Lime. Okay. Now, imagine that you cut it into two parts. The lemon, the yellow lemon. You see the very acidic lemon. So you get it? Is it done? Is it done for everybody? Yes? Say again, lemon. Lemon. Okay. Now you will chew into this lemon. You do it? Now, I can predict that in the mouth of most of you, there is a lot of saliva. What does it mean? You can open your eyes. What does it mean? It means that we have a reflex, a Pavlovian reflex, and we protect our mouth from acidity with saliva, because saliva is a chemical buffer. Which means that imagine that you have a wine, which is slight acidity. You drink it, you perceive the acidity. Instead, if you say lemon, 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 you drink it, you will not perceive the same acidity because you have the chemical buffer. So even the words are important for making cooking.
So everything you bring to
everything is important.
It's important too. So taste doesn't exist as little.
Taste.
Right.
Yes.
Taste.
Taste. That what we perceive with taste is modified at the environment. So we have. So this is why your question was so difficult.
And by the way,
and very interesting. We have to be open-minded. And there are many phenomena that we don't know. And if I were not a chemist, I would be excited to be a sensory physiologist, because these people. It was discovered 10 years ago that the fat has no taste, except that they discovered that the fats are triglycerides.
Fats have no taste.
No, except they are. Imagine the bottle of oil. In oil, you have molecules that I call triglycerides, okay? Which is a comb with 3 teeth. These teeth are fatty acid, just to be short. And depending on the length of the... When you put oil on the mouth, there is no taste. But some enzyme cut this part, fatty acid, and it has been discovered that we have receptors for some of this fatty acid. And then it's a kind of taste. And the behavior of some animal is changing with the recognition of this thing. So it's a new sensory modality. And it's crazy. 21st century, and we still discover new possibilities.
Basic things we discover.
Oh, I love that.
Get in here.
So what are meals like at your house, out of curiosity?
At home, first of all, I'm cooking daily. I am the one who cooks daily. I don't spend much time on that because I prefer calculating equations, which is much better. It's different. But I need
so what do you make on a typical night?
I need to be good in science, not in cooking. So I leave the artist cook. It's their job. I'm not an artist, I'm a physical chemist, and I have to focus on physical chemistry. So I don't have time. I'm leaving my home very early in the morning. I don't have time to do shopping. I don't take time to do shopping. I don't want to take time to do shopping. I come back late, and I have to to cook for the family. I don't care what I have, I'm doing my best because, look, imagine that you buy some meat that will be tender. The price will be $20 per kilogram probably. If you understand that cooking at low temperature you can get the same result at $4, then you cook at low temperature. So very frequently I put something in my oven and I leave it for days. It's low price because I'm not rich. I'm paid by the French government, so very low price. I'm sorry, and the French functionaries are not well paid. It's not like university professor at Columbia. No, this is why I consider moving here. So. Except that the offer was not made. So anyway, so that, you know, my children love truffles. I don't have enough money, but I have oil bottles with 7 compounds, and you have the odor of white or black truffles. So I put drops of this oil, and they are very happy. The same with phenolics, the same with glucose. I frequently use tartric acid. The herbaceous odor in olive oil, it's crazy, it's basically better. So I don't see the problem. All my brandies are vanillin and paraffin because it's better.
Hervé, I'm being told we have to stop, I'm afraid. But I think that it's impossible to have sat here for the last 10 minutes and not to have learned something. I don't know what more university can offer than the chance to learn something new. I learned so many new things. I'm sure all of us have too. Thank you so much.
We should congratulate the artist because the life of an artist is very different. It's an encouragement so that we can open a note by the restaurant.
Please come back and join us again.
Thank you very much.